Welcome to another episode of Growing Guelph. Today on the show is a conversation with Dr. Anne-Marie Zajdlik, family physician, HIV/AIDS specialist, Order of Ontario recipient, and founder of the Arch Clinic in Guelph, Waterloo. She also launched the internationally renowned Bracelet of Hope campaign, raising over $1 million to build a clinic in Lesotho, Africa. If you think her name sounds particularly familiar, it's probably because she ran for the Green Party in Guelph in the recent federal election. I really enjoyed this chance to sit down with Dr. Anne-Marie and dive into her early days of treating the HIV/AIDS, lessons from the pandemic, her global health work, and how those experiences shaped her political journey with the Green Party and her future hopes for our city. If you're passionate about building community in Guelph, I think you'll really enjoy this one. Before I wrap up this introduction, if you enjoy Growing Guelph and want to help support local storytelling, I've launched a Patreon. For as little as $1 a month, you can get early, ad-free episodes, you can submit questions for guests, and help shape future topics. It's totally optional, but it always helps keep this project going and growing. You can check it out at patreon.com/growingguelph, and I'll make sure there's a link in the show notes. Thanks for listening and supporting independent local media. And now to my conversation with Dr. Anne-Marie. Today on the podcast, I am joined by Dr. Anne-Marie Zajdlik. Thank you so much for joining me, Doctor.
My pleasure.
So I guess just to get this right off the bat, do you prefer being addressed as doctor? Do you like just Anne-Marie? Anne-Marie?
Yes.
Okay. You'll be
Thanks.
Anne-Marie for this conversation. Thank you so much for joining me today.
My pleasure.
I know we had reached out, or I'd reached out to you kind of before, and it's part of a journey that I'm going on of talking to some of the other political figures in Guelph and that, and I guess kind of just to hop right into it, you recently ran as part of the federal election for Guelph for the Green Party. I know you weren't successful with that election, but it was clear that there was a lot of support for you and for the Greens. I know Guelph certainly has... There's a real uprising of like support and that for the Greens. I see a lot of green signs around my neighborhood and things like that.
Yep.
I guess is that, I mean, obviously we can talk about the election and that, but maybe before we dive right into that, just like to talk to you about your history with the city of Guelph. I understand that you moved to Guelph in 1982 to study biomedical sciences at the University of Guelph.
Yes. Yeah.
I also went to the University of Guelph for biological sciences, not biomedical.
Yeah.
And then you later earned your MD from McMaster.
Right.
What initially drew you to medicine? And if you can speak to that, do you know how your time in Guelph shaped your early career path as a physician?
I'm one of those people. I don't think that were very common who knew what I wanted to do before I knew much else. I was 8. And I don't remember telling my parents that I wanted to be a physician, but my mother wrote it down. And then when I graduated...
You made enough of an impact that it made...
Yeah, she wrote it down, she framed it. And then when I graduated from medical school at my graduation, she gave me this framed piece of paper that had my handwriting on it. So it's just been something I wanted to do from the dawn of knowing. Yeah. Well,
there's got to be some security and not even just security, just the certainty, I guess, of that.
I think so. Yeah.
I, in many ways, have had a very typical like millennial career path where like what I went to school for is not exactly what I ended up doing, and then I've had multiple different jobs, and it feels like my career will be very different decade to decade, and I won't know what I'm going to be doing in the future.
Yeah.
But you're someone who you knew you wanted to help people. You knew you wanted to work in medicine. I knew I wasn't cut out for medicine early in my tenure at my bachelor's degree at the University of Guelph. Something about learning the intricacies of the human body would just set like it made my skin crawl a
You
little bit.
just shrugged your shoulders as if it was kind of gross.
That's what I like. Yeah, there's
Good
something
idea
about
not
like
to go in.
yeah, sitting there and learning about like the human spine would make me hyper aware of my own spine in a way that
Yeah.
I was just like,
Yeah.
no, I don't like this. I'm going to learn about plants instead.
Okay, good.
It's different enough from my own biology, my own
Yeah.
cellular makeup that it was kind of different enough, and yeah, that's why what I ended up doing. So probably a good thing that I didn't go into medicine, but you did. Did you like? Were you familiar with Guelph at all before you came here for school?
No.
Yeah, where'd you grow up?
My father was a bank manager, and it was at a time when bank managers were transferred every 2 or 3 years, which has shaped me as well, not necessarily in all positive ways.
Yeah.
But when I was a teenager, we ended up in Woodstock. And I remember walking by the new high school I had to go to as a grade 12 student. I had to switch, and that was when there was grade 13. So I had to do grade 12 and 13 at the school that was our rivals from the previous school in Ingersoll.
Oh, that's hard to...
Yeah.
Especially at that age.
At that age, it was
School
very
rivalries
tough.
mean so
It
much,
was
right?
very tough. Thankfully, I have a twin brother, so we could go through all this stuff together. But I remember driving by the new high school the day that we moved, thinking, when I go to university, I'm going to stay in the town that I go to university in, and my kids are going to be raised there. And so I think that's why I put down roots in Guelph. Plus,
that's
I met my
interesting.
husband at the University of Guelph.
Yeah.
And then came back here and stubbornly put my feet down and put roots in the ground.
So you almost had that thought even before you went to school?
Even before,
So,
yeah.
I can't say, like, what was it about Guelph that made you feel that way? Because it wasn't necessarily Guelph, but at least Guelph didn't change your mind, right? You came here and something about the city, at least didn't
Well, you
take
develop
off
a
that path.
community fairly quickly
Yeah.
when you go to, and Guelph is a great university for community. At least it was back then, where I right away became involved with groups of people that are still friends to this day. And then I went to McMaster, but I lived in Guelph because I was married in my first year of medical school, very young, 22. And so Guelph remained home even when I was going to medical school.
So it sounds like in some ways, like, you said your father was a bank manager, and because of the nature of the job at that time, you kind of had I didn't grow up with anyone in the military, but there's the stereotype of like a military family.
Yeah, I can relate a lot to people who were raised with in military families. We kind of talk the same about what difficulties that caused and first world problem, what trauma that may have caused. But it's a good idea to have insight into who you are and why you make certain decisions, good, bad, or ugly. And I'm always watching to see if I made that decision because of how I grew up, or am I making that decision because it's the correct decision to make? I'm better at it now that I'm 40 years later than I was when I was in my 20s. But yeah.
Yeah, I guess those things of like, your identity and things like that.
Very much so.
It's really easy for your, like for me, I grew up in Niagara Falls and I lived there until I was 18 and I went to Guelph. But when you're in that same sort of cohort of like the same kids you went to like junior kindergarten with and grade 1 with, and then you as a group go on to high school together, and it's easy to sort of think that your personality and who you are gets a little bit set in stone because everyone knows who you are, and you have that continuity of like a social situation that almost holds you in place versus people like yourself. You almost get to experiment a little bit when you've had that moving around to different places. Each new school you go to, like maybe you and your brother kind of had that opportunity to say like, who are we going to be at this school? I don't know if you ever looked at it that way. When you're a kid, it's much more like terrifying, right? It's less like opportunity based.
When we changed high schools, I don't look back and think it was mainly survival. How do we survive being the new kid in school? Because new kids aren't necessarily treated very well. But what I did learn when I moved high schools was that the best way to become part of a community, that's always been important to me, is to get involved. So I tend to be over involved as a result. And I don't think I was over involved in high school, but I was pretty involved. All the sports, all the clubs, the student council, everything you can think of, I was in it, right? And that was mainly so that I could put down roots, right? Instead of kind of get rid of that internal loneliness that is there when you move around a lot.
Yeah. I guess it's a lot of those things. It's a blessing and a curse, and it's easy as an adult when we look back at those and just say like, oh, the lessons learned and things like that. But you're right that as a kid, you're very much focused on survival. Everything seems like it's the end of the world. Everything feels like life or death. And you know, a lot of those, it's fair to feel that way because when you're young, all those feelings are new. And I don't know. I don't have kids of my own or anything, but I I don't want to be the sort of adult who dismisses young, like passionate emotions about things. Because I remember being young, and when you have a passionate emotion, the adults in your life, it can be tempting for them to just be like, "You're young, you don't know what you're talking about," dismissive
Yes.
of it, and
Yeah.
that's not really fair because those emotions are very valid and they're as real as they feel. Just because an adult in your life says like, "Oh, you know, wait until you're older, then you'll really know X feeling,
Then
or you'll
you'll
know
really
that."
be jaded. Yes.
Yeah.
Except young people, if you encourage that passion, are often at the forefront of movements, right? Because
Mm,
they have the energy and the passion and kind of the hyper focus on one thing without bringing that jadedness or defeat into the story, right? And they
yeah.
can move mountains when they're in that space, provided they're being led well, led from behind, right?
Mm.
Encouraged from behind. Yeah,
I guess you got to experience a bit of that
for
with
sure.
your political run, right? Like there must have been a lot of support, and I know the Green Party in general tends to,
Yeah, very great. Yeah, it's
yeah,
great.
connect with. I don't say the youth. That makes it sound too much of a like. You know, it connect resonates with young people, especially with young people in the overwhelming feeling of we're really living through a crisis of some sort,
Or
and
many.
we're living through multiple
Yeah,
crises,
yeah.
and there's like immediate ones, and then there's ones that are coming down the pike of
The existential ones.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it can feel really overwhelming for people, and it's good that there are movements and there's the energy to direct that fear into action as
Hmm.
opposed to just feeling powerless. And like you said, then end up being jaded. And I think that's like the antithesis of political power is it's not even voting for the opposite team, it's or the opposite side politically, it's just not even caring to vote and checking out altogether
Yep.
is almost what you're up against, right? Like what you're
Hmm.
really fighting for or
Hmm.
fighting for in people's minds, because when things are so big it can yeah there's a hopelessness and a bit of a sense of like, well, what can I do as one voter in Guelph?
Hmm.
I guess maybe there's been enough time since the election. Like, how do you feel about? I would say how do you feel about how it went down, but what's your take on what's your perspective on it now that we're a few months away from it, if you
Hmm.
don't mind me asking? And
Oh, no problem. So, medicine was on my radar from when I
mm,
was young, but politics was not.
yeah,
And it was the liberals that actually approached me a couple of years ago. And at that point, there's politics. No, we can't do it.
mm,
And then Mike Schreiner approached me. And I was already kind of ruminating about what can I do next to focus on the climate and to focus on people who are vulnerable or who will be vulnerable. So social justice has always been important to me before I even knew that you called it social justice,
mm,
right? I had to adopt that term to identify a part of myself as being someone who focused on social justice issues. So to me, it was I'm going to do this because in order to affect more change or to lead more change, I need more power.
mm,
That was the right thing to do for sure. And the political process was very exciting, lots of fun because of the team that came together.
mm,
I found a group of people, or they found me, that I connected well with. It was a very diverse group of mostly young people, and we just clicked. And we had the same mindset of wanting to do something about the climate and wanting to do something about people who are suffering.
mm,
So what was interesting is the medical learning curve is like this. It's a really steep learning learning curve, especially if you're learning HIV at the dawn of the pandemic was an incredibly steep learning curve, but politics was like straight up. It was incredible the amount I had to learn in a very short period of time, not being a political person who had ever ventured towards politics before, and then having to read a 700-page party platform for the first time. And as I'm reading it, was like studying medicine, which was to me was always positive and encouraging, and I would get excited and enthusiastic. I was excited about the Green Party platform and still am. So I think that platform is very much a blueprint for the future for all political parties. And without the changes that come with adopting some of those policies, we're going to be in really big trouble. So it was kind of the first step in a bigger piece of advocacy that I would like to take on moving forward.
So it sounds like from that answer, your foray into politics is still an ongoing conversation in your life, an ongoing thing that you're.
I don't know if it will be politics. Like, will I run again? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I guess there's more to
Yeah,
there's more to influence politics than just running and being elected, right?
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of ways to lend your expertise and your voice
Right.
to the cause.
And I think the Green Party, it's more about the cause than it is about the position and the power, right? I'm not blanketing other people who are in other parties, but for the Green Party, it is about advocacy and causes. And when a Green MP gets in, we haven't had very many of them. Mike Morris, for example, Elizabeth May, Jonathan Padno would have made an incredible MP. The focus is on putting pressure on governments to do the right thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it's always the sort of political mind games that even individual voters have to play of the I'm trying to remember the word for it, the strategic voting that we all kind of have to decide of.
Which is sad, right?
It is sad, and I don't know, I guess it's tricky. I read an interesting, I couldn't tell you the quote of where it came from. It was a social media post. It was right near the election. And someone was saying a little bit of something that I've taken to heart, that voting in politics isn't about swearing your allegiance to a party. It's not about like, oh, I have to agree with 100% of every single thing this party is going to do before I can give them my vote. And it's more like public transportation. You catch the bus or the train that's you think is going in the
Get you where you want to go.
Get you to where you want to go, and
Yeah.
sometimes that involves getting on a train that's just going east because overall you're going east, even if you also want to go east
That's
and
brilliant.
north and things like
Yes.
that.
Yeah.
And that's a nice way of looking at it, because I think like that jadedness that can come with getting older and getting a little bit like, oh, the political process involves a lot of giving up of certain things and sacrifice of some things, and maybe it shouldn't, maybe it doesn't need to, and however you want to view it that way, but it certainly does. And I think that can lead people to think like, oh, well, what's the point of really going out for a cause if in the end the messy outcome is going to involve a lot of compromise. But that kind of compromise in that discussion is the political process at the end of the day. We live in a bit of a divided country, divided Guelph even, in terms of people's thoughts on where things are going, and that's okay. Like, democracy is supposed to be a little bit messy and a little bit frustrating at times.
But we do need we need political reform, right? Because it's
Yeah.
not democracy if huge swaths of the population are voting out of fear, right? And
Yeah.
the last election is a good example of people voting for their country, believing that their country would be best served by this person or by that person,
Yep.
and often voting against their own values because they're voting for their country. And the democratic process means, or to me means, you have a choice and you can choose the party or the person who most exemplifies your values, and not have to take almost a political stance yourself,
Yeah.
so that the outcome you hope you have in the country is a leader who's going to move us forward and not take us backwards in a very trying, difficult, dangerous time.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very true. There's who knows what interesting political ramifications we could have if we had something like ranked choice voting instead of just the first past the post, all or nothing. You get one vote, because then people could have some of those fears of strategic voting be alleviated. And yeah, but I guess to steer away from the modern day politics and kind of to get to some of the early work that you've done in your career. I understand that your work in the HIV/AIDS crisis and the care has been quite transformative, both like locally and globally. Can you share a little bit about what inspired you to found the, is it pronounced the Arch Clinic, or do you ARCH?
It's had a few iterations
Okay.
over the years. So initially it was the Maasai Center for Local, Regional, Global Health, and then it became Arch, and now the clinic is called Hive.
Okay.
Again, not on my radar. When I started practicing in Guelph, I was 26, which is pretty young to be taking on responsibility like that. I joined a group practice, but earlier on in an elective that I did at Dalhousie University when I was, I think, 23 in internal medicine, I was in the room when the first dose of the first HIV medication was given to the first person in the country, the first HIV positive patient in the country.
Wow.
And there was a lot of celebration around that, and a lot of hope, but it was just one medication. And I knew when I was standing in the room that this was important. But I also recognized that the person that was getting the medication had been extremely stigmatized, and was very alone as a result of that stigma at a time when people were terrified of HIV. So it was his the state that he was in that I needed to understand. But it was also needing to understand what HIV was and how it led to a person being this lonely, alone, and stigmatized. So I went back to McMaster University, and there wasn't much to learn at the time, but learned as much as I could about HIV. Started working with one of the first HIV physicians in the province, Dr. Stephen Landis, and then came to Guelph and started seeing HIV patients. That evolved into more patients needing more care, and eventually being approached by the Ministry of Health to start an HIV clinic in Guelph, which was also like, I don't know how to do that. I can't do that, right? But there was enough support in the community. We sent an email out asking who would be interested in starting a clinic, and I walked into a room that was standing room only. From all walks of life and all communities in Guelph, and so that's how the first HIV clinic, which was actually the 14th HIV clinic in the province of Ontario, was opened in 2005.
I think I know my generation. I was born in '91. For context, came of age enough removed from
The
the
80s.
onset of the 80s and the
Yes.
AIDS crisis
Yep.
and that we can learn about it, but unless you really dig into, like some documentaries or some primary resources that speak to what the crisis was like on the ground, so to speak, it's hard to get a sense of how truly scary and stigmatized it
Terrifying.
was. How like
Politicized very early on.
Yeah.
In North America. Yeah.
And I mean, a lot of us have a memory now of the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, and what happened there, and all of the, the backlash against the measures that we were told to do and things like that. But I almost can't really even imagine what would have happened for a pandemic like the HIV/AIDS crisis, which so primarily, and not just, but primarily impacted such a already marginalized segment of our population, which was still trying to make a voice for themselves, make like the concept of pride and things like that. Like these things were still so new and coming together.
That's right.
And it was just a couple of years ago. Someone sort of described this, and it really blew my mind at the time, that for a big part of the LGBT gay population, or I should say movement, they had like they were so deeply impacted that they'd lost so many voices of a generation
Yeah.
that we're still dealing with the ramifications of that. Like so many people who aren't here who would be the mentors of the young people, the like just what that does to, like, you can imagine what that would do to any group of people to have to just lose so many people. And yeah, I mean, I'm not necessarily equipped to be the right person to speak to this, but I know it does make me want to look into it more, and especially just to be better educated and equipped as a person about future pandemics and what that could be like.
Yeah.
But
There's a great book called And the Band Played On, which is written by an HIV positive author who has since passed away, but he was in the thick of it in the early 80s and lost everyone he loved. And the story talks about what that was like and how these people were lost because the deaths were not easy. There was a lot of suffering.
yeah,
In the early days in Guelph, we couldn't find groups of people that would take care of my dying patients because before 1996, when there was no effective treatments, they all died. So we had to create our own care teams to be able to go into people's homes and help them die there because people were so afraid of being near someone who is HIV positive.
yeah,
But that book talks about the politics of it and how I think that generation of people found their their feet in terms of activism, and that has led to where we are now with Pride, and a whole month that celebrates not just the 2S LGBTQAI plus population, but it represents other populations who have been marginalized and stigmatized, and we're putting them in the forefront to honor them, right? Because we have so much to learn when we honor diverse groups of people. And it makes us richer as a society. So it thrills me when I know where we were in 1990 and earlier than that to where we are now, where we wouldn't just let people die at home without support because of their sexuality. It just would not happen, at least not in this country. Just wouldn't happen.
yeah,
now.
yeah. I mean, sometimes it's easy to think of to focus on how far we have to go, but it's also very important, maybe sometimes even more important for younger people to take stock of how far we've come. And
Yeah.
none of that needs to say like, hey, you need to like quiet your voice down because we've already come so far. And it's more just to have the perspective and to
That train going east,
yeah,
right? I'm going to
and
stay on the bus because the bus is moving forward when so many things are not moving forward and we seem to be stuck in so many other ways. The wonderful thing about HIV was it was an entire HIV treatment was that it was an entire world, the research world at the time, that was able to put treatments together that stopped people from, because it's universally deadly. COVID was not universally deadly. HIV/AIDS was universally deadly. If it's not treated, it still is. And many people in the world still die of HIV without access to treatment, which is going to be worse now that that our neighbors to the south has dumped UNAID, right?
Yeah.
UNAID. And so many more people are going to die. But what we've done in North America and in Europe is not only create medications that worked, which were handfuls of medication that were toxic, taken 3 times a day, now to an injection, 2 of them that are given every 2 months. And when I see a patient in my HIV practice, I'm not dealing with their HIV. I'm like, yeah, you're undetectable. Yeah, your immune system is great. But you have diabetes and you have high blood pressure and you're smoking, and we need to do all of your screening tests because this is an older population for the most part, younger people as well. So that's a tremendous global effort that was successful.
Yeah.
And now we need to use those same forces for good that created that global effort and direct it towards other existential crises that now exist to correct those. That's a massive effort because what we're facing is so much, it's so dangerous to all of us, right?
Yeah. I think as someone who, myself, who and, no surprise to listeners, tends to feel and think and vote more left-leaning, whatever the left-right political spectrum means to the listener. Uh, a frustration I have with conservatism is that often it feels like conservatism will happily accept all of the hard-fought leftist um, things that people have really died for,
Successes that
the
people
successes,
have sacrificed for.
but
That's
they're
right.
born into a world where, we have the weekend, we have the 40-hour work week, we have, maybe not for physicians, but we have a lot of people enjoy workers' benefits and pensions and like universal health care, like so many things that at the time were radical. And they weren't all just leftists, but they were radical positions that had to be fought for.
Mm-hmm.
And now that they're in place, they're become like third rails that people can't touch because it's like, well, they're too beloved to even talk about touching.
Mm-hmm.
But then the conservative movement wants to pretend as if like, well, yeah, well, of course those things were good, but these new ideas, like it's almost like you have to be ignorant of history a little bit, and that's
science.
not to say that they're
And science, right? Yeah.
and I mean, and that's coming from someone who like appreciates the balanced, however you want to talk about, like the balance that can be had when some people want to kind of push forward with like radical change, and there's some people who, for whatever reason, they want to say like, okay, let's think carefully about how we move forward. Let's make sure we're moving in the right, like, and I'm giving a lot of the benefit of the doubt to that, like maybe the left right spectrum of the right side there in terms of what it could be in the best of times, but I struggle to see the conservative position on climate change, for example,
Mm-hmm.
where the only way it makes sense to me, and this is where maybe a lot of them fall into it, is if you believe that all of the scientists are lying.
That's right.
And if
You have to deny.
there's these
deny it.
conspiracies,
Yep.
and that actually the people who were on the money are all of the like oil and gas companies and their research, and like they're the ones who stumbled across it. Like, you might as well think that like, well, cigarettes are actually healthy for you, and that all that medicine, like it was all just like
all that research that was misinformation. We were all lied to. So here's a pack of cigarettes, and that's a really good analogy. So we are affluent. I think what you're saying is we're affluent people who have so many things in place that we take for granted, that you have the luxury of going far right and now saying we don't need any radical change because you can deny climate change.
Yeah.
And you can criticize the gay movement. You can name call and criticize immigration, or take a stand directly against it. But you don't know historically where we've come from.
Exactly.
And historically, and in the future, where most of us know we need to go, right? Yeah.
It's similar to, a negative or something I've heard people express is, well, if we're all equal, why do we need to have pride for certain people? Like, how come there's no straight pride? How come there's a BET, like Black Entertainment Channel, where there's no white entertainment channel?
Man.
And it's like,
yeah.
well, that's being
So
like deeply ignorant of the history of it all, right?
And that's the luxury of not having had witnessed what Black people had to live through.
Exactly. And
but also
I
not
hear
have
that from people who grew up in places where there weren't a lot of Black people,
Sure.
who grew up in Canada,
so again,
where
the luxury,
exactly,
right, of not having to see that. But I was in exam rooms with people who were my age, dying of HIV, coming in every day, closer and closer to death. So you cannot deny AIDS, and you cannot deny that population suffered the most in North America because the powers that be did not want to acknowledge that they were worthy of the science that was necessary to find a cure. They rose up themselves and found that cure. And then to be in the same exam room in 1996 when medications were available and prescribe them, and then a month later see the same person who's emaciated and on death's door come back looking like you, very healthy, and I don't recognize them because I've only seen you when you're really sick.
Wow.
There's who you really are. That's who you really are.
That must have been an incredible. I mean, even just your career, like you're talking about, in terms of it going from a death sentence to just not even their most
Yeah.
like medically important thing that you're talking to them about. I mean, I guess that's almost the dream that physicians like wish for every medical ailment, right? Like that's people working in oncology and in cancer research today. Like that's the medical future that they're hoping for in 50 years time, where the doctor will say, "Oh yeah, there's some cancer in your screening thing." It's like, "Oh, we'll get that taken care of." Like where it can become almost, I guess, just routine, and that's true of so many things in the past 100 years of medicine, where like death sentences have just been reversed, and we have so much to be grateful and thankful for, but we can't let that gratitude and thankfulness, uh, as I said before, like stop any of our persistent drive forward, because even the things that are available doesn't mean it's accessible or cheap for everyone, or does like there's still all these barriers in place. I don't know if you're familiar with the author, podcaster, YouTuber John Green, but he's been doing a lot of work lately talking about tuberculosis because and he has a new book out too that I forget if it's tuberculosis is everything, or basically he's argued a lot that like tuberculosis was almost completely eradicated from the United States and from like a lot of Western populations, to the point where people don't even know what it really was and what a life-changing death sentence in many ways, and just how many elements of our society were built around this disease that just shaped our lives. And it still is like one of the leading causes, not the leading, but it's such a huge factor for people in developing countries around the world.
Resource poor countries, definitely.
Yeah, and like part of the thing of his book is to just try to tap into that ancestral memory of like, hey, so many things in our modern day life were shaped and created by us going through tuberculosis as a people, and like we almost moved past it and then forgot about it.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense.
Which is what humans do, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So just getting back to it being Pride Month, and explaining to someone, why do we have to have Pride Month? Why do we have to celebrate one group of people, the gay population? And their stigma and what they live with is not over. As a matter of fact, in the States, they're under immense pressure again, an immense stigma, and their lives are being threatened again. So I don't think we'll ever be able to do without pride. We need to stand up for the rights of others. That's how I'm wired. But that population will always need to fight for the right to exist, at least in my lifetime and possibly in your lifetime. So I'm wearing the pride pin till I'm 95. It's important.
Yeah, and I think that's admirable. Like people often, and I won't say it comes from a good place, but I think a bit of that mentality of like, well, why do we need to celebrate this? It comes from the naivete of people who are like, well, I was raised to think that everyone's equal, and so doesn't that equalness mean that like we all get a fair shot at life now? And it's like, yeah, but and then this is part like what of like intersectionality and like other things are really driving home, is that like, yeah, but what does it mean for the fact that like your grandparents lived very very different lives, like if we're talking about like racialized people, right, where like these things have huge knockdown impacts, and just because we might live in a current climate where like legally things are better for people, or that people have more rights, or that like it's just very ignorant to think that like, yeah, well we fought that battle and now it's done, right? Like it's you hear similar things when it comes to like feminism, where people are like, well, women have the right to vote, they have the right to open a bank account, like what else do you want? And it's like, well, like every woman is still like deeply dealing with the fact that there was thousands and thousands of years of, and you can't even put it in the past. To put it in the past is to misconstrue it, to say that like there used to be sexism. There used to be huge, deeply rooted sexism in every aspect of our lives. And some of those have changed, but a lot of them, the cultural practices, the cultural expectations, like these things are still in place for us. And yeah, that's true of feminism, and it's true of a lot of other isms of our lives. But I imagine that as a physician, you've witnessed how housing affordability and climate change can really impact well-being in people. What motivated you to transition from healthcare into politics? And was there something particular about the Green Party that resonated with your values?
Again, the Green Party, more, I think they would identify themselves as more activists than politicians. And when they get to Ottawa, they behave, or to Queen's Park, because that's where Mike Schreiner is, they behave more like activists and politicians. So they keep their hand on the pulse of the people in their community and really fight hard to make sure that what people need, what people get, right? So for me, the transition, I'm still a practicing physician, but moving into politics came from a desire to try to do something, find more power to do something about climate change as an ordinary person in a community, and to find a way to lead my community in an effort that could show us all how we could activate locally on a community basis to do something about climate change. I was having a conversation with a friend today who was an MP in Guelph years ago, and he agrees that if we're going to fight climate change and social injustices and the gap between the rich and the poor, which is getting greater and greater every day, housing insecurity, food insecurity, it's not going to come from the top. It's going to come from the ground up.
Yeah.
And the organization that I created, Bracelet of Hope, which builds HIV structures and treats HIV in resource-poor countries in Lesotho, that there's no funding that comes from government. That's all from this community and how they took on an idea and ran with it. So my hope was to become an MP and have the power that it took to focus on climate change and to focus on those affordability issues. So now I just have to pivot a little bit and figure out how to do the same thing without being a member of parliament.
Well, I mean, I guess to your point, there's lots of avenues to power. There's the direct political power that you can get, but there's also when enough people believe in you and believe in your movement and believe in the things that the ways in which you want to change the world, that you can, there's the power of the people that can be wielded in that way as well.
But I think the people now, and the people in a general sense, are more jaded and discouraged and hopeless and more, sitting in their homes and doing their best to survive.
Yeah.
Not looking outwards as much anymore and looking for a person that they can follow or a cause that they can follow. So to wake up the masses is more difficult now than it was 25 years ago, I think.
That's interesting. And I think that's sort of getting at maybe speaking to part of what drove me to want to start this podcast, which is found my own attention, and that a lot of people, like maybe my age and in my cohort of friends and family, and that our attention just gets so focused on these big national news stories, worldwide news stories. Like, you feel like you're part of you're a global citizen, and we're all tapped into the same like news stories of the weeks and that, but it can be very isolating, and it can lead to this disconnect from the world that as you understand it through your computer screen or cell phone screen versus the real world. Not that world's not real, but the more direct world that we live in our community around us. And I think like the fact that there's fewer and fewer local news options Guelph doesn't have a daily newspaper anymore. There's like for a pretty big city and things like that, it just feels like it feels like even like platforms like the one I'm building here, like these things should be more commonplace, and they shouldn't just be relegated to the odd like AM radio station and a couple people. Like I want it there to be more focus on the local, because I think the local is where you can inspire people and change their hearts and minds, and you can kind of get like an injection of that hope of like, no, how we spend our time really matters, and what we do is important.
Yeah.
And
how hope can change into activism, which can make positive change.
yeah, exactly.
No question. So
And
I have that experience, right? But I think it's harder to find that experience in this day and age. So we're going to see something very interesting tomorrow in the States, because 2,000 cities are hosting protests.
yeah,
And they think that millions and millions of people will come out to protest their present government. And I think it's something about no king for us, or
yeah,
no king
no
here,
kings, I
no
think, is
kings,
the
yeah, something
movement.
like that. So people will get to the point, ordinary people will get to the point where they will take to the streets, and I like to see that. Because taking to the streets means you're shoulder to shoulder with people who are as upset as you are.
Yeah,
And collectively, you can really make things change. So the focus is going to be on the millions who are protesting, not on the parade that the president's, I don't want to say his name,
yeah,
that the president is going to have in Washington. Let's take the focus off that nonsense and put it on people who want to bring down or change what's happening to them politically.
yeah, and just getting people out and connecting in person and letting them see that, like, hey, you're not actually alone in your room looking at your screen feeling hopeless.
Yeah.
There's a lot of us out there, and a lot of people that can, yeah, that in-person connection is very important, and something that I think we're still really dealing with the ramifications of so much of our lives going to digital spaces and going to these the individualism of our own little screen and our own little profiles online, and like what that really means for us. I know that you had proposed employing social workers in your constituency office to assist with housing, disability benefits, and emergency services. Can you speak to like what inspired that idea and how you believe it could transform constituent support?
As the healthcare system has disintegrated, and it is disintegrating, most definitely, I think it's headed for a collapse of some sort. But people on the front lines of healthcare, like nurses, nurse practitioners, and family physicians, I will sit in my exam room and try to. I used to be able to address all the concerns of the patient who is sitting in front of me, but more and more those concerns are in the social arena. And I'm not a social worker, so I can't find a house for my patient. But being homeless is a huge determinant of health, right? And I can't buy groceries for them, and I could and do every now and then, but I can't do that with a large number of patients of mine who are now looking for the food bank. So what I recognized over the last 5, 6 years, maybe longer, is that we don't have the people in place to show those that are experiencing affordability issues where they can go for help. And part of the reason is that's not coordinated. So where they can go for help is not a coordinated effort. So the hope was that we would have a coordinated effort out of a constituency office that brings all the groups together that are already providing services, but getting them to work kind of as one organism, still separate, but as one organism, knowing what we're all doing to serve people and to serve those that are about to be jobless as a result of tariffs. That's 16,000 people in Guelph that are about to lose their jobs. So we have pulled together, the Green Party and the NDP Party has pulled together a group in our big event coming next week where Charlie Angus comes to speak. And we're hoping that out of that effort, it's been named Resistance Resilience Resistance Guelph.
Yeah, I spoke to them, or at least
Yeah,
two of the people
yeah,
involved in that on the podcast, Connor and
yeah, Connor.
yeah,
Yeah, Connor's amazing.
yeah.
So we're hoping that as a result of the event that's coming out, which is sold out, that we can create that organism that can move forward. So one of the jobs I want to take on is to try to fund it, because none of these organizations are funded well. And we need to fund them. It's not going to be governments that do that. It's not going to be our provincial government that does that. So how do we raise funds to make sure that all of my patients who have homes right now are going to lose, the ones that will lose their jobs, how are they going to make mortgage payments? How are they going to find a place to live? We have to get out ahead of this thing and provide the leadership that prevents people from suffering.
Yeah. I mean, in some ways, it's heartening that there's so much intelligent people like yourself who care, who want to make things better. And in other ways, it's frustrating to live in a world that feels like we have so much access to power. And by power, I mean ways to shape the world in ways we want, like technology and abilities. But it doesn't feel like any of that is, or not enough of that, I should say, is translating into really securing the future for people.
The bus moving forward in the right direction.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's like we have
Yeah.
some luxury cars moving forward
Yeah.
for certain people,
Yeah.
for certain demographics, for certain, well-off people, but that's very different from the bus, from the train, from things that are accessible to everyone.
Yeah.
I know you've been involved in some international work as well. Can you speak to a little bit about your international, your international work and how those global experiences have informed your perspective on local healthcare?
Yeah, I need to write about that to understand how that informed me, because
Is that an important part of the process? Like when
it is an
you
important part
write
of the
and then that
process.
kind of solidifies
Yeah,
your thoughts?
yeah, and then to put that in some form that other people can read. So, as part of my journey with HIV, we built a clinic in Guelph that served people locally, and then built a satellite clinic in Waterloo. So, we were able to provide care to people in this huge chunk of southwestern Ontario that were not receiving care before. And then I listened to Stephen Lewis speak. Do you know who Stephen Lewis is?
Sounds familiar.
Massive advocate. Now he's in his late 80s. Previously in the NDP government, led the NDP party provincially 70s and 80s, I'm going to say. But then became the UN envoy for HIV/AIDS in Africa and started his own organization called the Stephen Lewis Foundation. So some friends of mine dragged me to one of his talks, and he is one of the most remarkable orators ever. You're just mesmerized when he speaks, and he has this huge, compassionate heart. And he had just released his book called A Race Against Time. This was 2004, 2005. I had just built clinics in Guelph, and I went to one of his talks and saw that he was broken. So a person who had accomplished this much had gone to sub-Saharan Africa and was broken by all the death that he saw in mostly women and children. And that moved me to tears to know the amount of power that he had in his advocacy, but he was defeated. And I just couldn't get that out of my head. And so for weeks I studied his book and then realized, man, we've got 30 million people in sub-Saharan Africa who are dying of HIV. We've kind of packaged it up here in some ways. We're moving forward. We're making progress. So how do we make sure that everyone in the world has access to the treatments that the people in the Western world have access to? So then I went to the Guelph Mercury when our paper existed, and there was a Guelph Mercury journalist, Joanne Shuttleworth, who had helped me get the funds I needed to open up clinics in the province. And I said to her, I want to raise $1 million for the first HIV clinic in Lesotho, Africa, which is was like the fourth highest prevalence of HIV in that country, with thousands and thousands of people dying. And so she just became glued to my side, wrote articles constantly, and we set the goal of raising $1 million in Guelph for that first clinic. And Guelph did it within 2 years by wearing a bracelet. This is the Bracelet of Hope. By wearing a bracelet, it was $5 per bracelet. And so by 2009, we had raised the million, and we kept the first HIV/AIDS clinic in Lesotho, Africa, open for a year. So we kept 11,000 people on treatment. Uh, that became the Bracelet of Hope organization. And so now what we do in partnership with Solidaire Med, which is a Swiss organization, is we help build and fund mobile health units that move into rural areas of Lesotho to provide primary care and HIV care to people who can't travel to the bigger centers in Lesotho. So we now take care of about, I would say, 30,000 people that we take care of on a regular basis, and every mobile health unit allows us to take care of 10,000 more. So that's an ongoing project, which I'm still involved, but I will probably get involved again now that I'm not an MP. I'll put more of my energy behind that organization, but it's about 20 years old. It's still going strong.
Well, I think those efforts are very commendable in terms of it's not always easy to widen the the circle of empathy to people on
Right.
the other side of the globe, and there's a lot of messaging and ideas out there that convince people to shrink that circle of empathy
Very
from
true.
their local community down to just like your immediate family, and sometimes even just yourself, like in the cases of people thinking like, well, you can't baby your kids too much, or you can't give them this or that, like, and it's part of that like individualism that can kind of just run rampant at times.
And 20 years ago, that wasn't so,
yeah,
right? That's a shift that's happened as so many other shifts have happened in the world. So climate change is a massive shift. But the first iPhone was 2008. So social
yeah,
media, information technology, now AI, another massive shift that your generation is trying to figure out. How do we navigate all
yeah,
of these major shifts, which have not been policied, I'll say,
yeah.
meaning that we don't have the laws behind them to protect people from the outcome of their existence.
Yeah, we're still very much in the wild west of
We're
these
in the Wild
technologies.
West. And
That
so it's easier to just, I'm going to take care of myself because this is too complicated out here.
yeah,
And in the context of all of this, I don't have the power to do anything. 20 years ago, you could step up, call your paper, they would write articles, people would read them, they'd show up to events, I'd speak everywhere, and you'd raise $1 million. And everybody would be encouraged by that. Now that's much harder to do. And it's the external forces that have caused that narrowing of empathy. It's not your generation's fault. It's when your generation has been
yeah.
raised and is living, right?
And I think like we're definitely going to look back at this time period of social media in the same way that maybe we look at certain like radioactive technologies. Like literally, we discovered, oh, look at this, like the unique properties of this radium. Like, let's use it to make watches. Let's use it to make this. Let's put it in everything.
Yeah.
And then it's like, like what we found out, or like maybe the way we look at the way the Romans built everything out of lead and put lead in their makeup and their pipes. And like when people in the future look back at our use of social media, they're going to say like, well, they took them little while to figure out what was driving themselves mad, like why their rates of like depression were going
Depression and
off the charts,
suicide and
and all of these
isolation,
things.
loneliness. Yeah.
And it's like,
Yeah.
well, they were playing with this technology and they hadn't even restricted it so that like kids couldn't use it yet, and they hadn't even done
Yeah.
this, and all
But
of the
that's because the technology comes first.
yeah,
And then
exactly.
trying to control it when it's just advanced
And
so
then the people
quickly.
making the laws begin to be the oligarchs who create and control that
And the people who
technology.
create the technology are billionaires, they're
Yeah.
gazillionaires. So the emphasis now is on trying to find your niche in that world and becoming extremely wealthy at the expense of the climate and other people, right?
Yeah. And to talk about like that shift of people's ideas about their responsibilities as a global citizen, and we at some point we were really building this idea of like, no, we have a lot here. We like in Western countries like Canada, we have a lot that we can provide, and we have a duty and an obligation to help support like everyone around the world. because we're one human species. And I mean, if you want to go into the history and like intersectionality of it, like, you know, we're not just rich just by happenstance, and Africa isn't just poor by happenstance.
That's
There's like
colonialism,
yeah,
right?
hundreds of years of
Yeah.
history that like fully created those situations. So like in the same way that you know people talk about the the trends, like if you have two neighbors and you know one of them inherited nothing and had to take care of their parents, and they grew up in a situation with their parents were like, maybe had substance abuse issues and all of that, versus like other neighbors who you know grew up in a very wealthy family, educated, like we would fully be able to acknowledge all of those massive differences in situation of how people were raised and how they came into the world. And like those same factors are true at like bigger country levels as well. And yeah, I think the older I get, the more fascinated I'm becoming with history. I've talked about this a few times on the podcast, but the last few months I've done fallen into a deep dive on like World War I, which I had done a little bit before and just learning about it, but it for something that's such a footnote for a lot of people's understanding of history, you know, you spend a couple months of you learn about like Vimy Ridge, you learn like some names of Passchendaele, you get an idea of what Canadian people did, you learn about Trenchfoot and stuff like that, but then you kind of just move on from it and you move on to other things. But like we are very much still living in a world that was completely shaped by the World War I and World War II, which are very much linked conflicts.
Yeah.
And it seems like we're still like, and I mean, it's obvious to say we're living in a post-war world, like post-World War I and II world, but like we're living in like, I can't help but see that like there's just been such radical change. And yeah, I don't want to go down too much of a tangent of that, but I think it's just history isn't as long ago as it sometimes seems when you're, you know, in grade 10 history class and you're learning about the last 100 years. When you're 16 years old, 100 years seems like ancient, but it doesn't take that. Like, you know, I'm in my 30s now. I get a couple decades under my belt and it's suddenly like, oh, like World War I was yesterday. Like this was my
Really?
like
Yeah.
great grandparents' generation,
Yeah.
right? Like this shaped everything.
Yeah.
And we literally nearly tore ourselves apart as a people. And maybe we still are. Like maybe we're still
Or we're
actually
about
living
to.
in,
Yes.
yeah, about to again.
Yeah. There's another great book that I loved reading by, I think his name is Thomas Friedman, and it's called "Thank You for Being Late." He's a journalist in Washington who would meet the people he was interviewing at a cafe, and they didn't know how to get to the cafe. They are always late, and in those 20 minutes is when his ideas flowed. And he talks about three transformative existential movements in the world that are affecting all of us, and we weren't able to get ahead of them before we were affected negatively by them. And that's what your generation is growing up in, is the chaos of those three forces. One is globalization, one is climate change, and one is social media and information technology. Whoa, like it was a lot easier being raised in the 70s and 80s than it is being raised at the beginning of this century. But he also talks about how those same forces can help us reset, get the rudder straight, start moving in the right direction, and correct some of the things that came out of the dawn of those new events. But I don't think anybody predicted what would happen politically and how we become so divided during a pandemic. We were divided before, but the pandemic showed us our divided colors, and how we never dreamed that Canada would be divided as well. And then to see what's happening in the States, I don't think he predicted that. I have to see if he's writing another book, because, what do we do now?
Yeah, I mean, this came up in a previous podcast, but I'm very grateful for the particular, maybe everyone is to some degree, but the particular time that I was born in terms of getting to experience a good chunk of my life pre-social media.
Yes. Yeah, my kids too.
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
coming of age, like just as I was becoming an adult, those like Facebook became a thing, and but being able to just tap into the pre-social media way
Playing
of thinking.
outside, falling off your bike, television only for an hour a week, that kind
Yeah.
of thing. No access to
I don't know if I
personal
ever had
computers.
television for just an hour a week, but I remember like the computer in my room not having internet and things like that, which was just huge unto itself. Like even when I think of what is a computer without internet these days, it's hard to even picture what it would. What does it do for you? Yeah, it's a games machine, I guess. But I'm grateful for having that ability, and to your point, it's easy for people in the past, like when we're looking at sci-fi and stuff like that, great intellectual minds predicting what the future is going to be like. And you end up with a lot of positivity, and like the Gene Roddenberrys of the world, who they see kind of where technology's headed, and they're just like, we're heading towards a utopia. I mean, even Gene Roddenberry in Star Trek had to go through, there is a World War III in the history of Star Trek that happens before they get to the Federation of Planets, and I think their World War III kicks off in like 2026 on their timeline too. So we're kind of on. On track.
No, you're not going to predict that.
No.
We're not going to predict that.
We won't, but...
It'd be short and sweet if there is one.
Yeah. No, that's what is it the Einstein quote? Like, I think he says something like, I don't know what World War III will be fought with, but World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones. But anyway, the point is that there was a time in the 80s and the 90s and early 90s maybe where we were seeing these things on the horizon, like the internet's going to connect us all. And we could only envision the benefits of it all. We were like, wow, like democracy is going to flourish. And the things that we can't predict, like to your point, the misinformation, like right now, everyone's social media feeds are just being flooded with AI pictures. And our ability to discern that their AI is like...
It is the gaps closing.
And if anyone who thinks like, well, I know what AI looks like, you only will for a very brief period of time, and then you will never know.
We're stuck.
Yeah, and maybe the backlash to some of those things will be the sort of positive, like digital things. The currency of digital things will drop. The value of them will drop. You'll never know if something's real. You won't really care if you see someone that on social media and what they're bragging about, because you won't even be able to verify if that's true. And because of all of that, people will begin to put more emphasis on in-person connections.
That's very hopeful, but you're a university-trained millennial, right?
Oh, yeah.
So that's what's driving extremism.
Yeah.
Right? Is the misinformation. So if people... not everybody will be able to discern or will want to discern.
Yeah, I
they
guess
like
that's the
the
biggest
algorithm
thing, right?
their feed is in. They like seeing stuff on social media that affirms what they believe in, right?
This is this is what the sort of doublethink that George Orwell warned us about in 1984 of the ability, like if you don't remember from 1984, the doublethink was the party had an idea that it was virtuous to be able to accept contradictory things and as both being true. Like they're always at war with Eurasia. They were never at war with Eurasia. Like that sort of made up idea where, and I think we're kind of seeing that play out of people living in a post-truth world. And this sort of thinking like really breaks my brain as someone who's like loves the sciences and has like a real foundation in rationality and that kind of thinking, because for me, I don't choose to accept something as true. Like my rationality is won over, and once I accept it, it's like trying to think that 1 + 1 = something other than 2. I can't make it be 3 just because that's what I want politically, but it seems like a good segment of the global population is starting to be able to do that. Like they believe what they want to believe, and if something else challenges them, they can dismiss that.
That's what's happened in the States. People who voted Republican are not bad people. They're misinformed.
Yeah.
Now, other people have argued with me about that because I like to see the best in human beings, but But again, you are you're lucky because you were raised in an affluent country,
Yeah.
and you were educated, and that discerning thought comes from that higher level of education.
Yeah.
And now that education is so out of reach for so many people that the masses will not be educated.
And what's scary is, and then even the ones that have access to that education are choosing to put all their, like, oh, I don't need to write an essay. ChatGPT can write my essay for me.
Yeah.
I don't need to
Yeah.
think. This thing will think for me.
Yeah.
And that's a scary thing,
That's
right?
scary,
Like
yeah.
even in Star Trek and these things of the future, like very few future thinkers really thought that people would be gleefully willing to hand over all of the agency that makes them human to something else. Like we kind of thought of it as, I mean, that's a lot of people have made this point with AI, but they're like, oh, I thought AI would take the grunt work stuff. I thought it would do the things I didn't want to do. I didn't think it would
Do the
pen
things I
poems
should
and
be
create
doing
art.
myself.
And like, like we kind of had an idea that AI will do all the things that humanity has to do, and then we'll have leisure time. But instead, it's the opposite. It's the AI is taking all of the creative work, and humans are being forced into like more and more like, yeah. Well,
Sidelined. Yeah.
I'm trying to think of how to. I don't want us to. I know we've gone down some tangents of negativity, but I don't want to end the conversation on a negative point. So I guess my last question for you is that for people who Guelphites who are passionate about making a difference, but like a lot of people, they're feeling unsure of where to start. What's your advice for them to help them take that first step towards community engagement and to kind of connecting with the wider city?
I think we have to get offline to do that, and we have to meet in person. And that's very difficult because there aren't very many arenas where we can meet in person anymore.
The lack of third spaces is,
So
again, a common
that's
topic on this podcast. But
so that was also the idea behind a constituency office being a community center, so that people could find community and could have conversations face to face and have ideas and grow those ideas, but take them physically to the streets or to places where we physically talk to one another and activate. And you're not being distracted by things on social media and rabbit holes that take us totally away from the point and totally not focused on what needs to be done. So that's a challenge that I'm going to have to think through. How do we get people to gather again behind a positive effort that will not only be transformative for Guelph and maybe the country, but also for transformative for people who are languishing. Like,
Yeah.
how do we stop them from languishing?
that's such a key point of I don't know who said it, but I was hearing someone talk about how to speak again of like the big things that shaped the 20th century in terms of world conquest and that 19th and 20th centuries were about the powers that be sucking up and laying claim to all of the remaining land on the planet. And the 21st century has been the powers that be laying claim to all of our attention and our time. And there's something that I don't know if it's the current CEO of YouTube, but someone it was Netflix. They were saying that Netflix's competition isn't TV, it's sleep. And we see this like with all the algorithms on social media where they just want to engage with you and enrage you, and if enragement keeps you on the platform, then that's fine. But they'll get their hooks into you any which way, right? For some people, it might be like just endless amounts of cute cat videos. It doesn't matter as long as you're continuously just your eyes are on the screen, and they're monetizing.
That's what makes them money. Yeah, that's right.
And the bigger oligarchs that control those platforms, they want you to feel helplessly attached to these devices and that drugged and also they will parcel out like a little bit of community where it feels like you're getting like guess like the Soylent Green version of like the nutrients, where it's like, hey, you're seeing your friends. Here's a picture of your friend. Here's a post about them. Like, oh, like
Here's a
that post.
comment
Here's a
from
comment
them.
on it,
Yeah.
and it's like just enough nutrition to keep someone alive, but not enough to really sustain them.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
And I think that's the difference. Is like, maybe this is what I was saying in terms of being grateful of when I grew up. Is that I'm never, I hope not never, like I'll never really be convinced to go full digital, because I remember what that pre-digital, pre-life is like.
You won't be sated by it.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
You need other things to fill you.
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah.
And I hope that, if my generation can contribute, it can just be as the continuously trying to remind the youth that, like, no, the world you were born into doesn't have to be the only way that things are, and that we can build better communities. We can build stronger third places. We can, and it's come up before on the podcast, but I went to Catholic school. I grew up like kind of Catholic, sort of, but I've moved away from it. And I worry about all the things that we lost when
we lost that community.
Churches, yeah.
And service groups. We've lost service groups too.
Exactly.
Right?
Like, so much of the first half or so much of my life has been spent focused on the negativities that those like church brought to people, and the judgments, and the, people will get like outcast from their community. Don't have to go over it here. There's a lot of negativity in that, but we might have thrown out the baby with the bathwater by saying, like, we don't need church anymore.
We did.
When it's like, oh, but we used to live in tribes, and that tribal way of thinking is still like deeply ingrained in us as people.
It's in our premature, primitive brain.
Exactly.
Right?
If, like, from the way we like engage with each other to the way we raise kids and stuff like that, like, there's so many benefits to community living with other people, and none of that is like the commoditized nuclear family individualist way of thinking. Stripped us of like a lot of those things, and we're almost having to rediscover them. But thanks for I guess for sitting down and talking to me about all this.
My pleasure.
Varied things. I feel like we talked about a lot of.
Covered a lot.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you wanted to share with the audience in terms of if people are still wanting to follow you and what you're doing? I say politically, but when I say politically, I just mean more like community minded.
Activism.
Yeah. Are you still out there and on social media and that, or?
Yeah. For sure. So watch for Resistance Resilience Guelph. I'm hoping bigger things come of it, including that community piece that we're missing.
I think by the time this episode comes out, it might be sometime in July.
Yeah.
So
we'll know.
Yeah, we'll know, and some of that. But I guess just the biggest takeaway for people is that there's a lot of other people out there, probably in the same mindset as them, and they're not alone. And if you go out and start trying to connect and meet with people and reach out to people, it can be scary, but it can also be incredibly rewarding. Thanks so much.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Thanks for listening to Growing Guelph. I've been your host, Jordan Sloggett. Be sure to subscribe to us on social media, on your favorite podcast app, and if you have a recommendation for a future guest you'd like me to speak to, you can reach out to me at growingguelph@gmail.com.